Hi folks, and welcome to the next in our series on Headless CMS with Next.js. Today we're going to be talking about authentication. How do you add the ability for people to log in to your website? Now you may already have an authentication provider, but I'm going to show you a different one that you might be using called Auth0. And we'll have another example using a package called NextAuth next week. But for this case, with using Auth0, you're going to get a whole bunch of things kind of out of the box. First of all, they have great documentation for how to get started. They have integration directly with Next.js. And we're going to show you actually in the code how to work with your Agility content so that in Agility, which is the headless CMS we're using, you can actually decide, what are the roles that have access to each page? Or if you're just doing a more blanket, is the user authenticated or not, then you can do that as well. We'll show you all of this. Let's jump in. So if you're thinking about using Auth0, I highly recommend it. There's a really great free edition that you can use to kind of get you started, and you can actually do a whole lot with that free edition and really try it out and see how you go. If you do kind of move up to their paid plans or even an enterprise plan, I can tell you I have experience using their enterprise plan. Actually, I'll show you our dev tenant right here. So you get a development tenant plus a production tenant that you can use. So that's pretty cool. By the way, this video is not sponsored in any way by Auth0. It's just a good tool that we use. There's lots of other tools out there, and we're going to show you another one in the next video as well. We get into a different topic that also is more about personalization, but uses authentication as part of it. But one of the things that's cool, having your authentication piece somewhere else as opposed to you writing it yourself. First of all, I don't recommend you writing your own authentication piece. If you've already done that, or if you want to do that, power to you. But it can take a lot of stress off of you by using another tool. All of your user and role management will be somewhere else in another tool that you can set up, and all that's kind of taken care of for you. If you want to do something like fingerprint authentication using passwordless and authentication using something called passkeys, you can set that up here. You can do social logins. You can do enterprise logins using SAML or like Azure Active Directory or hooking up to Okta, all these other tools. There's just so many ways that you can authenticate. It's nice to have another tool that looks after that for you. So cool. So Auth0 is a pretty good tool. By the way, we'll be sharing a link to this Git repo. All this code, example code, is a fork from the Next.js starter that we've actually been using some examples from. But this is a fork of that that's going to show you some of how to do that. Let's jump into Agility to see how we've configured our headless CMS to work with this. Now, Agility has the ability to set up a sitemap tree. So we've done that here. And we've got all of the pages that are sort of denoted as secure pages under a folder called secure. And we've set that up. And so you have the ability in the properties panel of each page or folder in Agility to set up something called requires approval. All that's going to do is when you download that page, when you get that page object through JSON, it'll have a property on there called requires approval equals true. So if all you want to do is sort of check to see if a page needs to be authenticated, then you can do that. But in this case, we wanted to go a little further. We wanted to be able to assign roles that we set up in Auth0 into different paths of the site. So you can see on this site, we've got, so for this particular example, we needed to have secure things for the fire department, for the EMS, and for the media department to be able to have access to different pages within the site. What we've done is in this example, and there's a lot of different ways to solve this solve this issue, this sort of requirement. What we've done is set up a content list called auth routes. You could name this whatever you want, but all we've done in here is we've set up the menu text that we want to show, our URL that we're trying to secure, and what permission you need to hit that URL, okay? So that's pretty cool. Now we've got somewhere we've set that up. And I've only done it for 3 URLs just as an example. But if we actually jump into the code now, let's look at the code that's here. And we'll go into our middleware. And in the middleware at the top, we've added some Auth0 stuff. So we're using the Auth0 SDK, right? And so it has its own middleware stuff that goes on. And this is the example code you get directly from Auth0 itself. So they tell you, hey, put these things in there so that your code will work sort of out of the box for a couple of different routes. But then we've also written in this code, we've written this called check route access. So what that is going to do is it's going to grab your route, and we could pass a URL into this, or otherwise it's going to use the current path that I'm on. And if I don't have any auth route permission string, okay, so we're actually going to call this get. That get is going to use Vercel's edge config. So in this case, what we've done is we've pushed all those routes from that content list up into Vercel's edge config. Now you could also write them to a local file if you wanted to do a whole rebuild every time that list changes. You could write them to, like if you're doing, Amazon S3, you could write them to an S3 blob or some other key value store. You could use Redis cache for this, would be a really great use case for this. So some place where you have a really fast access to that list. You could pull them from Agility directly, but you're not allowed to do fetch requests from your middleware. So you have to do something where you can do a lookup that's going to work, that's going to be allowed here. So this example site, we've hosted this on Vercel as an example. So the middleware does allow you to use their edge config. There's a whole bunch of key value stores that you can also use here, depending on where you're hosting this. So we're just going to pull this key from there. And we're going to actually check to say, so our key is our path, by the way. So we just take the path and convert the slashes to underscores, and we see if this route requires authentication. That's really what this is doing. And if we don't get anything back, then we're on a route that doesn't need authentication. But if we do get something back, we're going to grab the auth0 session. And if they have a session, then we're going to decode that with JWT, pull out the user permissions. Now, this is all really fast. None of this is actually calling home. It's not doing any request to auth0. It's using our local secret key to decode that. So we've got this, the access token here that we're going to kind of split that apart. And it'll tell us what permissions they have. And I've just done a console.log of what permissions are in each thing here. And all we do now is we check the route permissions and make sure that all the permissions, if you have more than one of them that are set up on that route, that the user actually has all of those permissions. If they have them all, we're going to return true, otherwise return false. And then that's all we have to kind of do there. Really simple setup in there. So that's what our middleware is doing, right? Very simple, very basic setup. Now, if we actually look at the routing under our app folder, what we've done is, since we want this, and there's lots of different ways you could do this, but our main slug, which you've seen from the previous examples, is still doing static rendering, okay? So in here, you've got this, this is actually forcing dynamic on here, but we've got to revalidate on there, okay? Oh, sorry, force static, I should say. So we're forcing this to be static, and we've got a revalidate of 60 seconds on here, okay? So by default, all the pages are going to be rendered statically, which means they're going to render really, really fast. So that's normally a good thing. You could turn on server-side routing, but we want to have a really high-performing static version of the website that's not authenticated, and then everything under our secure folder is going to be dynamically rendered. So we have the revalidate set to 0, no cache, and we're going to force dynamic on all of these, okay? So no matter how the page is coded, we're going to force it to be not cached, and it's going to be server-side rendered. So that's cool. So everything under the secure folder that's here. That means that if you accidentally put routes in that are under the not under the secure folder, then this won't work that well. So that's just something to keep in mind here. But this is a really great solution if you have like a members section of your website or something like that, which is a really common use case. All right. Everything else is pretty much the same on here in terms of how it's doing all the Agility Headless CMS stuff. None of that's really different. One of the things that I did is I actually put this hidden div in there so I could check my render date to make sure that it wasn't being cached. And this is indeed working right. So if you want to use this code as a starting place, that's great. Now, the one piece I talked about from the middleware, where we're actually pushing everything up into the Vercel config here, let's actually see how that works, okay? So in the thing I'm talking about here is in our check route request, we're using Vercel's edge config, which is a really cool key value store that they have that's super high performance, right? So what we're doing is I have two places where this is actually being done. One is I have this pre-build .ts file where we're calling rebuild auth list, all right? But we're also calling this, if I just search the project, I'm also calling this from my revalidate. So what we're saying is if the user has saved the auth routes, so if they've published the auth routes, then we actually want to rebuild that auth list. Now, if you had an action where you needed to actually rebuild your site completely, so if you wanted to actually save a file, you could save a JSON file in your project's files. You could do that on a rebuild of the site. That would also work, which is like the sort of nuclear option that will work on any hosting provider. In that case, you just have to reference that JSON file in your lookup for the routes. Okay, but let's actually look at how this rebuild auth list is working. We're just going to only work on published content here, so that we're not going to care about we're not going to be doing something for preview mode here. So this is a little bit specialized. We're going to make sure we don't cache this list, and we're going to go and get the instance of our SDK. We're going to grab the auth routes list. Obviously, our language is English here, so if you had a multilingual site, you'd have to use a different language code or locale there. And then what we're going to do is loop through all of those items and create upsert operations for them in the edge config. So that's pretty straightforward. And then we're going to push that into our edge config. And I've actually hard coded a couple of my IDs here, and then my API token from Vercel that I've got here as well. So this is very specific stuff to Vercel. And then there's a specific fetch command here that you pass in to sort of push this up to Vercel. The other thing you could do is literally just download this content list, this list of routes, and save it as a JSON file, and then look that up in your middleware, which is another solution that you could do. I don't like that as good because you got to do a whole rebuild in order to do that. So that's going to take a little more time. This is nice because you're going to get sort of instant gratification. As soon as they publish that, the route changes, it's going to get published. The webhook will fire. It will do the rebuild right here. Now we can also trigger this by calling yarn pre-build. So I've set this up to the pre-build event as well, and that actually is going to go ahead and push all that in there. And I think I'm console.logging the, whether it was a success or not. Okay, so that's being triggered. If I look in my package.json for this, I've got this pre-build event. I'm using the TSX package to just trigger this this piece of code here as well. Now, interesting, when you use the pre-build event, that will also run on build. Okay, so if I just run yarn build, it's going to run that pre-build event first and push all my push all those routes up in as well. So you've got a couple different ways to kind of trigger that update operation. So if you do end up sort of using something where, write to a local file or do something where you need to actually do a full rebuild of the app to get it there, then you can utilize that for that. Let's take a look at how this actually works in the front end. So if I run yarn dev, open this up, here we go. We're running the site, and what we've done, and I have to kudos to my coworker Aaron Taylor, who did most of the work on this. I got to give a big shout out to him on this. He set up this starter so that it not only works with static pages, so everything that's not under the secure route is going to render statically. Okay, but he's also got a dynamic menu set up here. So the menu, to load the items for this menu, what it does is it actually calls a secondary fetch request. I'll just show you the code for that as well, because it's really cool. He's got another menu route that actually pulls in the all the stuff that you need for that menu. So under API, I believe it's under secure, and he's got this route called secure/menus that basically goes and double checks your Auth0 session to make sure you're authenticated and pulls those routes, the auth routes from the Headless CMS, and then shows you the menu text of there if you have access to them. So it checks each permission. So it shows you that list of things you have access to. Lots of different ways to solve that problem as well, but this is a really nice solution here. So if I log in, it's going to bring me to my Auth0. Now, excuse me a second while I go grab my password, and I'll try not to put it on the video so I don't have to spend time cutting that out later. So I've got this password, and now Aaron set all this up for me. So I'm going to try and do it right. I think I've used my normal username and password here. And again, all of this stuff, you can see now I'm actually over in Auth0. All of this stuff you can configure for how you want your authentication to work. And that's really easy. You don't have to write any code to do that. Oops, and I've got the wrong password. Give me a second. Hopefully I'll get this right. Okay, looks like I'm going to authenticate here. And now you can see it brought in the 2 pages that I had access to. So let's jump back to Agility really quick just to see which ones. So of all of them, see this is the menu text that's showing, and these are the pages, okay? So I've got access. If I just flip back over to Fire Info, I'm going to click into that. And you can see it's going to load that page, so secure/fire. fire. And then we've got on that page, let's actually just look at that page in Agility to see what that looks like. So the secure page here, we've got our heading. We've got this cool secure file component that I'm not going to dig too much into now. That'll be a future video where we talk about actually how do you do secure files inside of Agility. But this is using our secure files app. So this is using the Azure bucket. It's a nice bucket URL there. So this is the Amazon S3 secure files app. We also have one for Azure Blob Storage as well. So this is going to be delivered, if you actually, just to talk about it a little bit, if I actually click on this file, it's going to be delivered securely through a pre-signed key. Lots of different ways you could actually solve that problem as well. But that's what we wanted to show in this example. So you can not only have a secure section, but have secure files on the site as well. And then we've gone even deeper. You can have a secure component that you set up that renders and checks even more permissions. So if you wanted to say, hey, maybe you have access to the certain section on the site, but within that page, we wanted to have even further restrictions on who can see what's on different components on that page. You have all kinds of things that you can do here, depending on your unique requirements. Okay, so in this case, I do have the fire secure role that I need for that, and so it's showing me the content that's in there. Okay, and I've got a link to my secure file here as well. That's part of that other component there. So there's a few different pieces that we've kind of pulled in for this demo to show security in a headless CMS with Next.js. And I hope that really helps you solve your problems. Again, we're going to leave a link in the description of this video to that Git project. But as always, you can reach out to us. We've got the community Slack channel. This is available at the bottom of our website that you can hit us up. We love to have conversations to you there. Our engineers are hanging out there all the time, chatting, and we'll see you next time. And thanks for watching.